All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors to thank. Our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for dedicating all of her Shimon Drashos this month with immense gratitude to Hashem for all of the refuahs and the merit of a refuah shlema for all of those in need, and the schus of our brave soldiers, and the merit Hashem and the schus of the return of our hostages. Our week of learning sponsors, Derek and Lauren Fine, in memory of Derek's mother, Rachel Bas Shmuel. Our Daf Yomi sponsors, Yasi opened in the schus of refuah shlema for Luna Bas Yona Tova. And of course, we dedicate all of Maseches Bava Kamma Le'ilui Nishmas Master Sergeant Elio Michol Charush Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that of the merit. I had to do it because he paid for it. That's the only mamish. It was and exactly what I'm walking into over there. But all right, we hope that of the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah. The families a nechama. And we hope that in the merit schus of our Talmud Torah, our soldiers will be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedehem, and in merit Hashem, each and every one of our hostages will be returned to their mishpachas. So we'll say, with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Tzadik Vav 96. We are picking up in merit Hashem on Tzadik Hamid Beis 95b, and we are picking up at Tanya Kavose Deraf Papa, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up from the bottom. So supposed to remember again, we saw in yesterday's daf Rav Papa's statement, which actually got into a very interesting machlokes regarding Shevach Sha'al Gabe Gzela. Remember again, we were speaking about we're kind of enmeshed. There's so much we have to kind of unravel over here. Takanas Hashavim, but now of course what we are is we're right embedded in the sugya of when a thief steals something. So obviously, let's start with what everybody agrees with. What everybody agrees with is he's not going to pay any less than what the animal will. Actually, I take it back. So when a thief steals an object and now he wants to make restitution, so how do you evaluate restitution? So obviously, again, we'll say even in that question, there's so many different variables. What are the variables? Is the object itself that he stole in existence or not? If it's in existence, can he go ahead and say, Harisha Chalafanecha, here, this is what I stole, this is what I'm giving back, and really we don't even have to really get into the valuation of the item, because maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe what matters is, what I stole is exactly what I'm giving back, or maybe not. Maybe at the end of the day, valuation is locked in at the time of the theft, which is really what our Mishnah seems to indicate. Okay, then furthermore, what happens if there is appreciation? Does the appreciation ultimately belong to the Gazlan, or does the appreciation go back to the owner? So that was really the machlokes that we were dealing with yesterday with Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon. But the Gemara wanted to suggest that at the end of the day, there was another sub-machlokes. What was the sub-machlokes? Is what we call Shevach Sha'al Gabe Gzela. What happens if there's, supposed to say, in the world of appreciation, there's two different cases of appreciation. Case number one would be, let's say, a case of where Reuven stole an animal from Shimon. Reuven stole a sheep. The sheep developed a thick coat of wool, and the wool was shorn. The wool was shorn. So now again, Rabbi say, so who gets to keep that appreciation? That's case one. Case two is where the Reuven stole the sheep, and the sheep developed a thick coat of wool. A thick coat of wool. So Allah Chalamaisa, now under this circumstance, who gets to keep that wool? That's what we call Shevach Shagabe Gizela. So the Gemara was suggesting that at the end of the day, so now Rav Papa was the one who said that ultimately everyone agrees, Shevach Shagabe Gizela, the Gazlan Havri. Everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, any appreciation that's on the actual body, attached to the actual stolen object, belongs to the Gazlan. So we'll say that's where we're picking up. So Tanya Kavah said to Rav Papa, we have a brayso that supports Rav Papa. Rabbi Shimon says, Rowan Osa Ki'ilu Hi Shuma Etzlo Bekasaf Lemechza Lishlish Ularavia. That Rabbi Shimon said that halacha l'maisa, we view us. Remember again, we saw so much yesterday that we view the animal as if the animal is valuated. Right? We lock in the value of the item. We evaluate the animal at the time that it was stolen. And ultimately, again, we view appreciation as being partially owned by the thief, either again for a half, for a third, or for a quarter of the value. This goes back yesterday to what we discussed, that there's another potential possibility of appreciation valuation, which is maybe the thief shares in the appreciation. In other words, maybe it's not a question of does he get everything, does he get nothing, but maybe there's a third model, ultimately again, of sharing in part. Ravashi said, Ki avina be Rav Kahana, ibaylan. So when I was in the yeshiva, when I was in the house of Rav Kahana, the following question was posed. So ibaylan, Rabbi Shimon Damar lamechza l'shlish l'revia, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the thief shares in the appreciation. He gets a portion of the appreciation, not the total amount, but also not nothing. So the Gemara says, so when we pay off the thief, so we'll say, let's go with the model now that the thief shares in the appreciation to some degree. So when he shares in the appreciation, halacha l'maisa, how do we pay him off? Do we pay him off in cash, or is he entitled to money? Or is he entitled to an actual share of the appreciation? Now, the literal translation over here is from the meat. So let's say, for example, the appreciation in question is Reuven stole a cow, right? The cow becomes pregnant, and now ultimately again, and now the cow gives birth. So do we say that Reuven, that Shimon could pay Reuven off in money, right? So whatever, let's say, however we evaluate the appreciation, but let's say it's worth $200. Here's $200. Or is Reuven entitled to actual meat from the calf once that it's shechted? How do we do that? So the Gemara says, and we answer that question from here. The Amr Rav Nachman, Amr Shmuel, Shlosha Shamin Lahen HaShevach, Uma'alin Osin B'Damin. Both say, in general, there are three people who get the opportunity to share an appreciation, and halacha l'maisa, we go ahead and we pay them off. We pay off their portion in money. These are the people. Bechar lepashat, bal chov lelokeach, or bal chov liyisomim. So both say these happen to actually be very interesting cases. Let's just take a quick look at Rashi. Bechar lepashat. Listen to this. Sheshbicho es ha nechasim kodem chaluka. Ubishas chaluka notal habachar pishnayim bekarkos tzarich lahachzir lepashit revia hashevach shal chelek bechor b'dmos. So it's actually an interesting case. Let's say you have brothers that own an estate, and what happens before the property division? Ultimately, one of the younger brothers improved a parcel of property that then becomes the possession of the Bechar. Bechar gets Pishnayim, so part of the Bechar's Pishnayim, he gets a piece of property that was improved by a younger brother. So ultimately, the Bechar is obligated to make some level of restitution, right, reflecting the investment of the younger brother in what is now his property, the older brother's property. So again, he gives him, so tzarich lahachzir lepashut revia hashevach shal chelik bechor b'maos she'ein lo litol pishnayim b'ma she'eshbiach zeh v'mishbiach. So we'll say these are all cases of where you have to go ahead and compensate someone for the investment, for the appreciation that they created for you. And again, in all of these cases, ultimately you pay them off the appreciation in money and not in object. So case number one is where, again, younger brother improved property that then becomes part of the inheritance of older brother. Older brother is obligated to go ahead and compensate him for a portion of that appreciation. He pays him off in money. That's case number one. Case number two, Bal Chov Lelokeach. Look at Rashi. Bal Chov Atorif Lekuchos B'Shvil Chov Sheyesh Lo Al HaMocher. Ein lo koach b'ma she'eshbiach lokeach u'misako bal chov b'damim v'nosin lo d'mish shvacho v'nosin lo karka. Both say next case. Reuven lent Shimon money. As a result, Reuven has a lien against Shimon's property. Shimon sold off the property to Levi. Shimon defaults. Reuven goes and collects the property from Levi. But in the interim, what happened? Levi improved the property. So as much as Reuven, the creditor, is entitled to seize the property in satisfaction of his debt, halacha l'maisa, he is not permitted to go ahead and just seize the appreciation. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, he has to pay him off the value of the appreciation in money, not in property. And the third case, Baal Chov Yisomim, Rashi says over here, Baal Chov Shur the Nichse Yisomim, B'Shil Chov Avim is the same case. It's just instead of Reuven and Shimon, it's that Reuven lent, or I should say, Reuven lent money to Shimon. Shimon died, left behind inheritors. Now again, so now the Baal Chov is coming to collect from the inheritors, from the Yisomim. Same idea. That if halacha l'maisa, the property improved while owned by the Yisomim, the Baal Chov has to go ahead and compensate them for some amount for the appreciation. Good. So we'll say, so just three different cases. So Bechar l'pashet, Baal Chov l'okeach, or Baal Chov l'Yisomim. These are all cases where you have to compensate someone because they appreciated the property. They appreciate the property, and the way you pay them for appreciation is in money and not in the particular item. Is that true? Is that true? We'll say. So by the way, there's two things that's happening over here. What are the two things that are happening over here? Number one, what it tells you is when someone causes appreciation in the property, and then the property is taken by the other party, the entitled party is obligated to compensate for some amount of the appreciation. That's number one. Number two, in these three particular cases, appreciation is paid off in cash as opposed to an ownership interest in the actual item itself. Good. So the Gemara says, "I'm going to Rav Ashi." So Rav Ashi, Mi Amar Shmuel, Baal Chov l'lokeach yoiv le'shavach. Is that true? That Shmuel said that when the creditor sees his property, so Reuven lent Shimon money, Shimon defaulted. In the interim, let me say it differently. Reuven lent Shimon money, Shimon sold off property to Levi. Shimon now defaults. Reuven goes to Levi to collect property, encumbered property, to satisfy his debt. In the interim, Levi improved the property. So now again, we said before that Reuven has to pay Levi some percentage reflecting the appreciation of the property. Did Shmuel really say that? Vamar Shmuel said, Baal Chov koves hashavach. Shmuel said pretty explicitly that when the creditor collects the encumbered property, that what does he collect along with the encumbered property? Any improvement, any appreciation. So what's going on? So the Gemara says, Amar lo kashya, kan b'shevach hamagia l'ksefayim, kan b'shevach she'in magia l'ksefayim. So we'll say, this is actually an interesting idea. It depends on the type of shevach. It depends on the type of appreciation. If it's appreciation, there's appreciation that reaches the shoulders and appreciation that doesn't reach the shoulders. Well, so what does this mean? So here, they're gauging appreciation by the growth of produce. By the growth of produce. Look at Rashi. Hamigel l'ksefayim kegon tvua shegodla kol tzarcha nosna lelokeach odameha. So we'll say, now watch this. Salocha l'maisa. If let's say the land appreciated to the point that it has grain growing, and the grain, so l'ksefayim to the shoulders means fully mature grain. So we'll say, if it's the type of appreciation that's quote-unquote fully mature appreciation, ultimately that does get compensated to the purchaser. However, if it's lower level appreciation, that's kind of just subsumed under the regular property, and therefore, again, the creditor will take that. It's an interesting distinction over here. Amrle, v'hamaisim b'chol yom, but one second, these type of situations occur every single day. The Kamma Shmuel afilu shavach hamagia l'ksefayim, and yet Shmuel goes ahead and collects even from appreciation that reaches the shoulders. So also what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that the practice of Shmuel seemed to be that when a creditor would collect land from a purchaser in satisfaction of a debt, so the creditor would collect everything, including any appreciation on the land itself. Amalei, lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. I will say top of Tzadik Vav, 96a, ha demasik ba kashir ara v'shivcha, ha delo masik be ele kashir ara. So I will say, it's actually interesting. The Gemara makes a very simple distinction. What does it really depend on? It depends on the amount of the debt. I will say, so what Shmuel would allow is as follows. Sometimes the value of the land by itself without the appreciation was enough to satisfy the debt. In those kind of cases, so Shmuel would rule that what? Creditor can collect the land, but what? He can't collect the shevach. or at least he has to pay back, he has to give the purchaser some amount of the shevach, versus sometimes the amount of the debt included what? Value of property plus appreciation. And in those cases, ultimately, creditor was permitted to go ahead and collect the entire amount. Okay, beautiful. So Amar said to him, Hani Chalamanda Amar I Isle Zuze Lilokeach Lo Matzim Salach Lebalchov Shapir. So we'll say all of this makes sense according to the opinion that says, we'll say, like I said, there's so much here, to unravel. There's another discussion. What's the other discussion? We'll say, think about the following case, right? Same case we were dealing with up until now. Reuven lends Shimon money. Right? So now what happens? Obviously, when you lend money, what occurs? If Shimon has property, what happens to Shimon's property? Bepashtos, it's encumbered. Fine. After the loan was made, Shimon sells property to Levi. Now what happens? Shimon defaults, has no money. Reuven, the creditor, has the ability to go to Levi. So Reuven shows up now at Levi's house. Says, Levi, I'm coming to collect that field that Shimon sold you in satisfaction of my debt. Levi says, you know what? I hear. You're right, Reuven owes you $10,000. Here's what we're going to do. Sorry, Shimon owes you $10,000. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a check for $10,000. I would like to keep the property that I bought, but of course I understand I bought encumbered property, so I have to give you back the land. But instead of giving you back the land, I want to give you money. So does the purchaser have the ability to do that? So that's this discussion. Amrlei, so he responded to him, Hanicha, all of this makes sense according to the opinion that says, I isle zuze lelokeach, if the purchaser, so in this case again Levi, right, so we'll say, according to this, all of this makes sense according to the opinion that says that a purchaser doesn't have the ability to force the creditor to accept money instead of land. Obviously, if both parties agree. But there's the opinion that says that ultimately the purchaser cannot force Reuven to accept money instead of land. Elamando Amar, but according to the opinion that says, that if the purchaser has money, ultimately he has the ability to tell Reuven the creditor, listen, I'm not giving you the land, I'm giving you money. You're going to be made whole, right? You lend money, you're going to get back money, but I'm not giving you the land. That in this case over here, let Levi the purchaser say to him, if I had money, right? I would give you that money and I would remove your claim from the land in its entirety. Hashta havli giryua da'ara shir shvachai. Here at least, in the case of appreciation, allow me to retain a piece of the land ultimately corresponding to the amount of my appreciation. Interesting. So the Gemara says, Amrlei, Hachamask. You know what's the case here? Kigon dishavye nehili apotiki. So it could very well be that in this case over here, the case in question is where the land, we'll say the land was designated as an apotiki. Remember again, I'm both saying there's two different types of encumbrances, right? So in general, when you lend someone money, right? So the debt creates an encumbrance upon all property. Apotiki is a special type of encumbrance where ultimately, again, the borrower says to the lender, apotehe koi. This land I'm identifying as the sole source of your repayment. Now, what's the beauty of apotiki? What's the beauty of it? The beauty of it is it lifts the lien from the rest of your property. You see, normally, it's actually really interesting, when Shimon borrows money from Reuven, right? Reuven lends money to Shimon. So in general, what there is there's a general lien against all of Shimon's property. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is it's going to be hard for Shimon to sell any of his property with a general lien. What's the beauty of apotiki? Apotiki says there's a designated lien on one piece of property. So what that does is it encumbers one piece heavily. What it's able to do, however, is lift the lien on all other properties. The Gemara says that's the case over here. Ultimately, again, you could only have repayment from this, and therefore I will say that would be the case ultimately, again, where halacha l'maisa, at least according to Shmuel, halacha l'maisa, if the value of the land by itself meets the debt, then einach inami, the creditor would give back the appreciation, at least some portion of the appreciation to the purchaser. But if halacha l'maisa, again, the value of the debt was only met by value of the land plus appreciation, he would take everything back. Okay, beautiful. Amar Rava. Rava said as follows. So I'll say, so again, remember, we still have not resolved when you steal an object, what are you paying back? Now, obviously, in a simple case where Reuven steals a sheep from Shimon, and a day later he returns the sheep from Shimon, okay, that's it. He gives he stole the sheep, he gives back the sheep. That's an easy case. Of course, what we're dealing with over here is cases of appreciation or depreciation. What happens in those cases? This is still our raging machlokes. We have our Mishnah, and our Mishnah said it's a simple formula. What's the simple formula? We lock in the value of the item that you stole at the time you stole it, and that's the obligation you have to repay. As the Mishnah says. Mishnah makes it sound like appreciation belongs to the thief himself. Change allows the thief to acquire the object. That's what it sounds like from the Mishnah. No, it's not. That's the Mishnah says. And that's one school of thought. But now we see all of these other opinions. So again, just so if you feel like you missed something, you didn't miss anything. We just haven't. I mean, you might have missed something. But Lamaisa, we have not done halacha Lamaisa. This is still this machlokes. And by the way, I just want to tell you the machlok. There's a new Mishnah on Amud Beis. Still say machlokes. So we're going to wait a little bit to kind of get the entire playing field, and then Emeretz Hashem do the halacha l'maisa. All right, so let's go. Amar Rava. Rava says as follows: Gazel v'ishbiachu machar. So we'll say, watch this. Reuven stole a sheep from Shimon, and now watch this. He improved it. Umachar, and then he went ahead and he sold it. Okay, so now we're getting into another interesting case over here. So Reuven stole a sheep from Shimon, improved it, or whatever, it doesn't have to be sheep property, improved it, and now he sold it to Levi. All right, or Gazel v'hishpiach v'horish. Or what happened? Reuven stole ultimately again from Shimon, and now Reuven died. And his children inherit the stolen item. Now, both say, so in both of these cases, the common denominator is object was stolen, object was improved. Case 1, the object was sold to Levi. Case 2, Reuven died and his children inherited the object. So what's the halacha? Mashesh biach machar, mashesh biach chorish. So we'll say, whatever ultimately again was improved is sold, and whatever was improved ultimately again was inherited. Meaning what? This will say, what is Rav essentially saying? Thief keeps improvement. Thief keeps any improvement, and therefore Allah Lamaisa, if he sold it, it's a valid sale. If his kids inherit it, it's a valid inheritance. Look at Rashi. Mashesh biach machar v'shakil lokeach mechza o shlish o revia v'chein yoresh nami kulei shvacha kimas nisin mebnei takanas hashavim kidano. So we'll say, so again, now remember, even when you say thief keeps the appreciation, we have another sub-machlokes, right? What's the sub-machlokes? How much appreciation do you actually get to keep? But leaving that aside right now, the point that Rav is making is, Rav is espousing school of thought, thief keeps appreciation. Therefore, again, if remember, Reuven steals from Shimon, sells to Levi, obviously, again, what's going to happen? Shimon is going to go to Levi and get his object back. Right, and that's fine. But lamaisa, the appreciation will still belong to the thief. So in both the cases of sale as well as inheritance. So by Rava, so Rava says as follows: Hishpiach lokeach mahu. All right, so we'll see now. This is interesting. What happens in the following case? Right, Reuven steals from Shimon, sells to Levi. Levi improves the object. So now both say, now what's the halacha in this case? Mahu basar debaya hadar pashta ma macharishon l'sheni kol schos shetavo liado. So we'll say, what happens when you buy something? Both say, what are you buying? What are you purchasing? You're purchasing an object. What else are you purchasing? Any rights that the seller had. So in this case over here, the thief who's the seller, what rights did he have in the object? What rights did he have? He had the rights to appreciation. So therefore, you're going to both say, when the purchaser purchases the object, he's also purchasing rights to appreciation. So therefore, even when owner subsequently comes to reclaim his stolen object, obviously purchaser has to give it back, but purchaser is permitted to retain ultimately appreciation. Incredible. So Rava asked the following kasha: Hishbiach ovid kochal mahu. This is an interesting case. What happens ultimately again if Reuven steals from Shimon and then Reuven sold it to an akum, he sold it to a Gentile. Now the Gentile went ahead and improved the object. Now Shimon, the victim, is coming to reclaim the object. What happens to the appreciation? Amar so the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Achami diftu Ravina, takanta la'oved kochavim neiko v'navad. Why should we enact a takana for the benefit of a non-Jew? Why? What purpose? What purpose does that serve? Let him be right. Let him have to give back the appreciation. Amar le lo tzricha kigon dezabne li Yisrael. Now we'll say what happened over here. What happened over here is the Akum sold it to a Jew. Okay, so we got a little chagadia going on over here. So what happened? Reuven stole it from Shimon. Shimon sold it to Akum, right? Shimon sold it to Akum. Akum sold it to Yehuda. Akum sold it to Yehuda. So I say, so now what's the shaila? Sof haba machmas ovid kochavim hu. So I say, so now the question really becomes, you know, when the ovid kochavim when Shimon goes in and seizes the property from Yehuda, what happens with the appreciation? So the Gemara wants to suggest, well, no, Yehuda can't keep it. Why? Sof haba machmas ovid kochavim harik ovid kochavim. So I'll say, so remember lemaisa. Actually, the truth is, I said something I shouldn't have said. I gave it away a little bit. So we'll say, so now, halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, we just said before, that when you purchase an object, remember again, what are you getting? You're getting all the rights of the seller. So if you're purchasing from an Ovid Kochavim, and we assume we do not enact this takana for the benefit of the Ovid Kochavim, therefore the purchaser from the Ovid Kochavim doesn't get any rights as well. To which the Gemara said, this is what I was saying. Lo tzricha kigon, the Gazel Yisrael, okay, so I gave it a little bit. The Gazel Yisrael, v'zabna nehile, v'shbicha Ovid Kochavim, V'hadra Oved Kochavim v'zabna li Yisrael. So we'll say here's the case. The case is where Reuven stole it from Shimon, right? Ultimately, again, went ahead and sold it to Akum, right? Akum ultimately improved it, and now Akum sold it to Yehuda. And Rabbi say in this case over here, Shimon's coming and claiming it back from Yehuda. So Rabbi says, so now what's the shayla? So we'll say, on the one hand, maybe we say like this. Remember, the item began in the hands of a Jew. In other words, in Shimon, Reuven. We're looking at Reuven the thief, right? And it ended up in the hands of a Jew, Yehuda. Right? So therefore, maybe since it began with a Jew and it ended with a Jew, therefore the takana is in effect. We'll say, which takana are we talking about? The takana that says that ultimately, again, the thief keeps appreciation. The thief keeps appreciation. So since it began with a Jew and it ended with a Jew, we'll say, by the way, just full circle over here, why does the thief keep appreciation? What is that? What is that? Remember, takanas hashavim. That's another application of takanas hashavim, right? Remember, even in a case, because I will say, remember we saw before, let's take a step back. Remember we saw before that halacha l'maisa, when does takanas hashavim apply? When the object is no longer in existence. But if the object is in existence, you have to give back the object, right? But even in that situation where you have to give back the object, what does the thief get to keep, right? Appreciation. How much appreciation? That's machlokes. But it gets to keep appreciation. But say, what's the logic of that? What's the logic of that? The logic of that, the thief could say is, look, you know why that animal appreciated? Why that animal appreciated? Right? Why did it appreciate? Or that object appreciated? I invested in it, right? I fed it, I sang to it, right? I walked it, I did whatever I did. Like I'm heavily invested in stuff that I steal, right? So Lemaisa, again, he put in effort. If he has to give that back, once again, that is going to be an obstacle to tshuva. So that's the logic of keeping appreciation. So we'll say, so now, by the way, I also understand why Lemaisa, that doesn't apply to an akum, right? There is no takanas hashavim by an akum. So therefore, I will say an akum doesn't go ahead and get to keep appreciation. So interesting, now it kind of all comes together. All right, so now I come to this other case. What's this case? Here we go. Reuven steals from Shimon, sells it to Akum. Akum appreciates under Akum. Akum sells it to Yehuda. So now what happens? Well, I'll say now Shimon, the owner, comes to Yehuda and seizes it. So I'll say, so now what's the shayla? Does Yehuda get to keep Akum? Does he not Akum, right? Does Yehuda get to keep Shevach? Does Yehuda get to keep the appreciation? So I will say, so on one hand we could say, so look, maybe we say like this. It began in the hands of a Jew. i.e. Ruvain, the thief, and it's ending up in the hands of a Jew, i.e. Yehuda, and therefore again, the takana is in effect, and therefore ultimately again, Yehuda should get to keep the appreciation. Odelma, kevan the ika ovekochavim be'emtsa. On the other hand, since there is an akum here in the middle, lo avdu le rabbanan takanta. Maybe the rabbanan did not make the takana, to which the Gemara says, teku. Okay, I'm going to table that one. Let's go weiter. Amra Papa. What's a really interesting Gemara over here? Amra Papa. Hi man de gazel dikla mechavre. I will say, listen to this. If a man, Reuven stole a palm tree from Shimon, and I will say, then what happened? He cut it down. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Afagav the shajemi ma'ar are. Even though again, we'll say imagine for a moment, easier to envision this case is like Reuven and Shimon have fields, adjoining fields, right? So now there's a palm tree on Shimon's field. Reuven goes over, cuts it down, and it falls onto his field. So now Reuven the thief has the object in his property. So we'll say, so now watch this. Even though now Reuven has taken the palm tree into his field, lo kani. Ultimately, again, Reuven has not acquired it. Reuven the thief has not acquired it. It was incredible. My time, I will say, what's the reason? It was called the palm tree when Shimon owned it, right, the owner, and it's still called the palm tree when Reuven owns it. So we'll say, well, we're going to see over here something amazing. In order for certain types of theft to occur, now I'll have to explain when this is. The Gemara says there has to be some type of change in identity. If there's no change in identity, then ultimately again the thief ultimately again doesn't acquire it. So we'll say, so for example over here, what the Gemara is suggesting is a standing palm tree and a felled palm tree, right, whatever, a cut down palm tree, they're both called palm tree. They're both called the dekel, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the thief doesn't acquire it. Okay, again, we'll say, take a look at Rashi. What does it mean he doesn't acquire it? Lo kani l'shalume dimei elayoyev le'dikla gufei deleka shinu Hashem. We'll say, what does this mean? Remember, we saw based on the Mishnah. We'll say, when the object is extant, right? The object is extant, what's your obligation, right? Reuven steals from Shimon, and the object that he stole is still in existence. What's the halacha? You have to give back the object, right? You don't have the right. So I will say, let's say again, Reuven says, I know, but I want to be about tshuva. I really like the object. Here's the cash value. You can't do that. If the object is extant, you have to give back the object. The only time that thief acquires the object is when there's a change, a substantive change. So for example, it's like going back to the Mishnah, right? Reuven goes ahead and steals wood, and he fashions the wood into a utensil. So now what do we say? Reuven acquires the utensil, and he pays back, right? He pays back Shimon the monetary value. The Gemara is going through cases over here, essentially what constitutes a change. So interestingly enough, the Gemara says, a felled palm tree is still called a palm tree. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, so Reuven the thief has to give back that palm tree. Now it's wood, but he has to give back the palm tree. Incredible. Next case. The Gemara says, good. Dikla va'avid guvi lo kani. We'll say similarly again. If let's say again, Reuven stole a palm tree, and let's say again, I will say in this case, bepashas, it would be a palm tree a felled palm tree, and he made it into logs. Right, he cut up the palm tree, ultimately making it into logs. Lo kani, Reuven does not acquire it. Why not? Hashtamias gubi de dikla mikri. So the Gemara says, Hashtamias gubi de dikli mikri. As I will say, it's still called logs of a palm tree. And logs of a palm tree is the same thing as a palm tree. So again, all different cases where even though a change has been made, it's not a substantive enough change for the thief to acquire the object, and therefore he has to go and return the object as is. Next, so the Gemara says, Avdinu kutsisa kani. Now I'll say if he took the logs, ultimately I made them into boards, right? Then in that case, the thief does acquire it. So I will say, so again, why? Because that's a substantive change of identity. Amar Rava. So I'll say, so this is really fascinating. So now what we're beginning to see is the Gemara telling us that halacha l'maisa, in cases where even though there may be some type of change, see, you would have thought, or I would have thought that halacha l'maisa, any type of change is enough for the gazlon to go ahead and acquire the object. Kamashmalon, what is the Gemara teaching me? It has to be a fundamental change of identity in order for you to keep the object. If it's not a fundamental change of identity, then halacha l'maisa, you cannot keep it. Incredible. Incredible. So the Gemara gives another example. Amarava, Haiman de Gazol Luliva. So it's like if a guy stole a lulav. Vav dinu hutzi, and he made it into leaves. Which I will say essentially comes by separating out, right? Separating the branches on the lulav. Kani ultimately acquires it. Why? They make kar luliva mikri fashtu hutzi, because in the beginning it was called a lulav, and now it's called branches. Now it's called leaves. So we'll say that is enough of a substantive identity change. Hutzi vavdinu chufya. What happens if you have leaves and you made it into a broom? We'll say, how do you make it into a broom? Look at Rashi. Hufya, Rashi says, excuse me. Hufya. Thank you. Rashi says, Hufya. So we'll say if you take, apparently it's good to know, if you take each leaf and you split it into two, obviously you're binding it together or it's bound together at the top. That's how you make a broom. So what's the halacha? So if you take the leaves and you make it into a broom, kani, you also acquire it. Why? Make kara hutzi v'hashta chovya. Now we'll say, what's interesting about these cases is it's the same object. Right? It's the same object, but identity-wise, it's fundamentally changed. So when identity-wise it changes, let's say again from leaves ultimately into a broom, that is enough for the thief to acquire the object. Chofya va'avdei shurshura. If you take both sides the broom and you make it into a shashura, Rashi says over shashura is a rope, lo kani. You don't acquire. Why not? My time of the hadr sasale. Because I will say what you could do is you could go ahead and apparently, again, undo it. In other words, in order to go ahead and make the broom into a rope, what has to happen? I guess you have to braid the independent leaves together, right, to make a rope. But what can you do? You can unbraid it. So because you can unbraid it, ultimately it's not a significant enough identity change. So, as well say, this is really interesting. Remember again, a lulav has a tiomes. Tiomes is the middle leaf, right? So you know, when checking a lulav, right, you look for the middle leaf, and you want to see if that middle leaf is closed, or is split, or is whole. If it's split, the lulav could be pasul. If it's whole, the lulav is kosher. Okay, there are more intricacies in the halacha that I'm telling you right now, but for our purposes, that's enough. So we'll say, so now watch the following case. So let's say now, Reuven steals a lulav from Shimon. And what does he do? He splits the middle leaf. So what's Rashi says over here? Tiomes kaf tomer ha'im soya al yon tiomesi. So he splits the middle leaf. Mahu. What's the halacha? We'll say, is this enough of a substantive change that ultimately, again, would allow Reuven to acquire the object? So we'll say, last line, Tzadik Vav Amud Aleph. So Tashmad, Amrav Masur, Amrav Yeshua ben Levi, Nitla HaTiomes Pasal. Now both say, this is Hilchos Lulav. Hilchos Lulav. If you have a lulav and the middle leaf was removed, your lulav is pasal. Amud Beis, my lav, huadin. Both say, that's why, by the way, you know, those people who are vigorous and vicious lulav shakers. You know that guy. Right? The guy who needs like a 6 foot radius right around him when lulav and esek. And I'll say again, that could be incredibly problematic because people don't realize it. But you could easily make your lulav pasal if you shake it vigorously. You could split open the middle leaf, and if you split open the middle leaf, ultimately again the lulav is pasal. There's always that guy, when we put it out in the shul, for pickup, for the little shuk we have over here, there's always that guy who comes in and feels the need to shake every single lulav. Literally, you see a light flashing before your eyes. You're like, I spent hours on this. Anyway, so Gemara says, my love, who adin lenechlaka. So we'll say, is this not the same halacha ultimately again for if you split the middle leaf? In other words, we'll say, isn't splitting the middle leaf the same thing as removing the middle leaf? Lo nitla shiny. No. Removal is different. Taha chasrala. Ultimately, again, because halacha l'maisa, it's missing. So both say there is a fundamental difference between something that is split versus something that is missing. Igad Amri, others explain. Tashma dera Masar Yeshua ben Levi nechlakat yomes. ultimately, again, if the middle leaf is split, naaseh k'mishenit la upasal. It's as if it's been removed. And I was supposed to say, a split middle leaf is no different than a missing middle leaf. And Shmana, so I will say, so according to that logic, it would seem to be that splitting the middle leaf of stealing a lulav and splitting the middle leaf would be enough of a substantive change for the thief to acquire the object, right? Because when he stole it, ultimately, again, it's a kasher lulav. Now we split the middle leaf. It's as if the middle leaf is not there. That would seem to be enough of a substantive identity change. Amar Papa, Hai man de gazel afra mechavre. I will say this is so fascinating. If I steal dirt, right? Reuven goes over to Shimon and he steals dirt. And what happened? Va'av de levinta, and he makes bricks from the dirt. Lo kani. Isn't this incredible? Ultimately, Reuven does not acquire the stolen object. Why not? My taima. Da'ader mashvele afra. Because ultimately, again, you could easily make the brick back into dirt. Others are both say, so now this is another level. So I say, up until now, what have we seen? That Allah Maisa, in order for a change, right? Remember, we'll say we're operating with a core principle. What's our core principle? That in order for the thief to acquire the stolen object, what has to happen? What has to happen is there has to be an identity change. An identity change. It's interesting, I will say, because in the Mishnah, we were speaking about a physical change. So now, ultimately, the Gemara is adding in over here that part of having a physical change is also an identity change. Okay, so now what we're beginning to see is, however, if it has an identity change, but that identity change is what? Easily reversible, that's not called a change. So therefore, if Reuven steals dirt, okay, and now makes it into a brick. So b'pashtos, it sounds like over here, I have identity change, right? It was dirt, now it's a brick. But since halacha l'maisa, the hadar mashvele afra, since halacha l'maisa, again, it can be made back into dirt so quickly. So therefore halacha l'maisa, ultimately, again, it's not called a change. On the other hand, watch this. Avda, Levinta, the Avdi Afra, we'll say on the other hand, if Reuven steals a brick from Shimon, then makes the brick into dirt, Kani, he does acquire it. Why? My Amrit, Dilma Hadar, Va'avid Le Levinta, you could say, but 1 second, right, Reuven, it can be easily remade back into a brick. But say, listen to this, Hai Levinta Achrisihu. This brick is a new brick. Upanim chadashos ba'olakan. And I will say again, panim chadashos, literally again, new entities. So we'll see here this fascinating distinction. So if you steal earth and make it into a brick, that's not enough of a substantive change. Why? Because that brick could be remade back into the same dirt. So therefore, if it's an easily reversible change, then at the end of the day, that doesn't acquire. On the other hand, if Reuven goes in and steals a brick, right, and makes it into dirt, he does acquire. But you'll say that lamaisa what? He can make it back into a brick. That's a new brick. Now we'll say, Rashi points out over here, why is it a new brick? Because it will say, Rashi essentially says, no two bricks are the same. Right? Again, I will say they're making bricks by hand. So even if you're trying to make everything the same, nothing is exactly the same. Therefore, panim chadashos ba'ulakan. Ultimately, again, something new is coming on the scene. Let's say there's a real profundity in this as well. If you think about it, this idea that change is only meaningful if it's not easily reversible. Right? If the change that is being made is one that is easily reversible, the halacha says that's not change. That's not change, right? So if you steal a brick and make it into dirt, right? So ultimately, again, you steal dirt to make it into a brick, that's not change. It's not change. Why? Because that brick could be very easily remade, ultimately, again, into dirt. I will say it's a tremendous yisod in life as well, right? We all have changes that we need to make. Change is only meaningful if it has the ability, if you're setting yourself up for sustained change. Now, not to say that unsustained change is not meaningful. Any change is meaningful. But if a person really wants to affect change in life, they have to ask themselves, how could I sustain this change? And I both say, you see this all the time, right? I make change, and then what happens? I relapse back into the person that I was. Why does that happen? Why does that? So I'll say, no, am I the only person who this happens to? All right, fine. Right, so I'll say, so it happens all the time. Why does it happen? It happens because at the end of the day, I didn't actually make a plan for sustained change. What I just did is, okay, I'm going to change, and boom, I change. Okay, let's say change is really hard, and if change is not sustained, right, all around me, it's going ultimately what's going to happen, the brick is going to become dirt again. That's just the way it is. I was saying the metaphor is so profound, right? Dirt, you can't build anything with dirt. You can ultimately build something with a brick. So if you take dirt and you make it into a brick, that's beautiful as long as you have a plan to build with that brick and to sustain the brick kite. But the moment you don't have a plan to sustain brick kite is the moment that what? Brick is going to be re-relegated ultimately again to its dirt kite status. I would say it's such a profound metaphor for life. If you want to make change, it's not enough just to think about the change you want to make, but how am I going to sustain that change? How am I going to sustain the brick and prevent it ultimately again from once again becoming dirt? Incredible, incredible. Hi man de gazal naska. Listen to this case. Reuven goes ahead and steals silver. Naska will say is like silver from his friend. And he makes the silver into coins. So what's talacha? Lo kani. Ultimately, again, he's not kona. Why? I will say once again, it's a reversible change. Hadr avelu naska. Because we'll say, what can you do? You take silver and you make it into coins. What can you do? Melt down coins, and what do you have? What do you have? Silver. It's an easily reversible change. Vavdinu naska. So I'm sorry, zuzi vavdinu naska. But we'll say ultimately, again, if you take coins and you make it into silver, then kani you acquire that. My amrit hadr avelu zuzi. And maybe you'll say, but one second, that's a reversible change as well, because you could remake it into coins. No, once again, panim chadashos balakan. But let's say coins are the same thing as bricks. Even if you remake it into coins, it's not the same. Right, it's not the same. You remake it into bricks, it's not the same. So we'll say what you begin to see. So once again over here, we're seeing not only do you need a change, but you need a change that is not easily reversible. An easily reversible change is not a change, both in halacha as well as in hashkafa. Shchimi va'avdinu charati. So we'll say if you take, we'll say shchimi are like tarnished coins, right? Silver coins that became blackened, that became tarnished. So if you take tarnished coins and now you steal tarnished coins and you make them like new, lo kani, ultimately again you didn't acquire anything. I will say, right? Obviously, because they'll tarnish again. Charati va'avdinu shechini kami. This is interesting. I will say. If you take new coins and you tarnish them, then what? You do acquire them. My amrit. So we'll say, what's the logic? So Kani, my amrit. Why would you say hadr avid lehu charati? You can make them new again. The Gemara says meida yadia shechamayu. We'll say once something becomes tarnished, you can never fully get rid of it. You can never fully get rid of it. So I will say absolutely incredible. So to go ahead, right, the avoda ultimately again of taking tarnished coins and making them new, you don't acquire it. Why? Because lamaisa again, it's going to tarnish again. It's reversible. Even if you go ahead and you take new coins and you tarnish them, and now you want to restore to their former luster, I will say it's never quite the same. Never quite the same. And I will say now, this is one of these things. So you think to yourself, I know where he's going with this one, right? That once you tarnish it, ultimately again, you can never make it whole. You can never make it beautiful. So I will say, this is not true. This is not true. See, I will say, here's the difference. While it is true that once you tarnish yourself, perhaps you can never go ahead and regain that former luster that you had. You're right. So I will say, so instead, what do? Just make yourself into a totally new coin. In other words, sometimes the thing in life is, I recognize that when I tarnish my coin, I can't restore it to what it once was. But you know what I can do? I could totally melt it down and make something brand new again. And in that case, I will say, and this becomes one of those things in life, there are two different models in life, right? Rav Kook talks about this in his Oras HaTshuva, that sometimes, again, a person could experience change within themselves, right? And again, it's the same me, but Lamaisa, again, I just have to tweak different aspects. Or sometimes the me that is so fundamentally broken that I have to create a totally new personality. So I will say, so sometimes in life, I could get the tarnish off my coins and I'm good. Other times in life, the tarnish is so pervasive that it's not enough just to polish a little here, a little bit there, but sometimes ultimately, again, I have to totally melt down the silver and create something dramatically new, right? Different times in life call for different levels of personal rectification. Okay, so we'll say incredible. So halacha l'maisa, we'll say for our purposes, halacha l'maisa, what emerges is that again, not only do you need change in order to acquire the object, but really it has to be change that is not easily reversible. Incredible. Let's go back to Zak Klal Kala Gazlonim Mashlimin Kishas Agzela. So the Mishnah said this is the rule. In general, a thief pays the value in accordance with the value of the object at the time it was stolen. So we'll say, the Gemara says, La suye I will say in general, whenever the Mishnah says, Zak Klal, this is the rule comes to include something. So what is it coming to including? La suye mai. La suye had Rabbi Lo, Ganav Talav V'nase Ayo, Egel V'nase Shar, Nase Shine Biyado. Ukino. Supposed to listen to this. Here's what it comes to include. This is incredible. So let's say again, Reuven steals a calf. From Shimon, and what happens? The calf becomes an ox, while Reuven the thief owns it. Now watch this. As a result, now the object has changed. What happens when you steal an object, right? What happens when you steal an object and it changes in the domain of the thief? What's the halacha? Ultimately, thief acquires it. Now we'll say, watch the application of this. Therefore, tavach umachar shelohu toveach shelohu mocher. Wow. Let's say, watch this. So now let's say Reuven stole a calf from Shimon. And now what happens? So Reuven steals the calf from Shimon. While Reuven owns it, the calf becomes an ox. So we'll say, what's the halacha now? So now subsequently, after it becomes an ox, Reuven goes ahead and slaughters it and sells it. Now generally, what's the halacha if you slaughter and sell a stolen object? What's the halacha? Arba v'chamisha. In this case, there's no arba v'chamisha. Why not? Because the ox belongs to Reuven, because he acquired it. Pretty incredible, I will say. So the gazal padna de ture mechabre. So we'll say there was a guy who stole a pair of oxen from his friend. Azal karav b'hu karva zara. Azal karav b'hu karva zara b'hu zara. So we'll say, so what happened? So what did he do with it? He plowed a field with it. Right, he literally sowed a field with it, plowed a field with it. L'sof adrin l'marei. Then we'll say, first of all, and he gave it back to the owner. Also, he came before the owner. Right, the owner came before Rav Nachman. Amar lahu zilu shomalu shivcha da'ashpach. Go ahead, and again, it's not just enough to return the object. Remember now, you used ultimately again this. You used the ox to go ahead and plow the field. So now there's shevach, there's appreciation ultimately again to the field itself. So the Gemara says, Amarle Rava, Turi Ashbach, Arla Ashbach. I don't understand. There's appreciation just about the oxen, not about the field. So the Gemara says, Amar Mi Kamino Nashim Kuli, Pal Kamino. You're right. I didn't say I have to pay back all of the appreciation, right? Because obviously, again, part of that appreciation is linked in the value of the field, but at least part of the appreciation that's linked to the oxen. Amarle Sof Gazelahu Vika Hadra Be'ene. But one second, why? At the end of the day, I'll say this should be an open shut case. Oxen were stolen, oxen were returned. Discussion over, right? What more is there to discuss in this case? Tisnan, Kala Gazlan Mishlam and Kishas Agzela. Ultimately, again, when you steal an object and the object is extant, ultimately all you have to do is pay back in accordance with the amount that was stolen. So listen to this. He said to him, so remember again, this was Rav Nachman. He said to him, haven't I told you before? When I'm judging a case, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. For some people, it's when they're watching the game, right? And for other people, Rahman al-Islan lo aleinu, right? And I will say, and for others, it's when they're involved in adjudicating a case. So when I'm adjudicating a case, I told you, don't talk to me. I have to concentrate. The Amar Huna Chavrin Ilai, because the Amar Huna Chavrin Alai, Ana v'Shavar Malka Achai Bedina. Because Rav Huna, my friend, said that I, Rav Nachman, and Shmuel, that Shavar Malka, right? I and Shar Malka, we are brothers in judgment. In other words, that we are highly skilled judges, able to adjudicate cases. And the reason why I was machmer with this guy is, Hay inish kazlona atikohu ubaina di iksane. the iknase, sorry. I will say, so this guy, so generally, again, if you steal oxen and you give back oxen, and the item that you stole is the item that you're returning, that's it, we're done. I said, why am I charging this guy an additional amount for appreciation, for the value that he got from plowing the field? Because this guy is a habitual offender. And because he's a habitual offender, therefore, again, I felt the need to throw the book at him, to charge him not only, again, for the actual gzela, but also, halacha l'maisa, again, for the appreciation. I will say, Shkayach, we'll stop over here. Mishnah tomorrow. Again, we're not finished with the sugya. There's still more to the sugya. We're going to be continued tomorrow. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Gemara Shkayach, everyone. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day.